Good morning, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Maui, the occupied islands here in the Pacific by the United States. I hope you're well wherever you may be. Today's talk, an overview of the Dharma Life. And as I see it, the twofold function of the Dharma Life, or the Pali equivalent, the Dhamma Life, the life of the yogi, the individual awake to, dedicated to engaging existence, their life, consciousness, in a transformational, purposefully transformational way. On the one hand, identifying states of mind that function to create self-generated conflict, and identifying states of consciousness that, when connected to and developed, evolve creatively the beauty of freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of action. I guess what I want to say first of all is that these are words, and the Dhamma Life, like living, breathing oxygen, nurturing ourselves through liquids, supplements, and foods, the direct, immediate immersion in life-sustaining activities. The Dhamma is a deliberate, life-sustaining activity throughout life, a consciously deliberate, life-sustaining activity that functions to release conflict and to elevate creatively the power and the beauty of freedom. From my humble opinion, take an individual's freedom from her or him, even temporarily, and one often feels contracted, and if extreme, say under the duress of torture or of imprisonment, one feels a terrible loss. Dhamma is freedom under all circumstances, the attempt to creatively engage the highest order of freedom possible. Okay, I'm going to go through a list. The Dhamma Life. My preceptor as a Buddhist monk, the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw, these were his direct instructions, as I remember them, to people and to me, that the Dhamma Life, the Dharma Life, the spiritual life, call it the life of an individual dedicated to the transformation of consciousness, one who engages consciousness with purpose and meaning and fidelity, as an artist would, coloring, painting, creating, sculpting. A Dhamma savant, a Dharma artist, creates and sculpts and forms deliberate states of consciousness and enacts them through speech, through thought and action. Call it a Dharma artist, an activist of consciousness, one who abides within the, you want to use the word invisibility, but so discernible are these states of consciousness. The absence of mindfulness of them. Look at the world today, to state the obvious, but all roots in what looks to be consciousness, this invisible field of inner beingness. made real through the senses. Okay. Let me go through the list of the, if I can remember them, the numerical order as I have learned them from my teachers. Mahasi Sayadaw was very clear about there are two main contexts to employ the Dharma life. One is purely the study of perception within one's own being. The context of self upon self, normally understood as meditation. The Dharma life and meditation, somewhat synonymous. Then we have the second context of self in context, life in world, being in an environment, I and other, us interacting with we, self on self, self and other, self in context, self in cosmos, self in multidimensionality, self inside and self outside, and self inside and outside at the confluence of the senses. Two contexts and then confluence. Right there, the Dharma life is enacted from birth until death. Consciousness and sensations inhabiting the environment called you or me. And we know the world inside and outside through the 6 portals, lenses of perception. The eye, the ear, the nose, the body, the tongue, and the mind. The complexity of a talk like this is there's a word, transliterating, taking from the atmosphere of an idea and feeling into where that idea is pointing to, so that we inhabit the direct, intimate, immediate experience of being. That is one of the most beautiful aspects of the Dharma life, is that it points to the distinction between conceptualization, ideation, abstraction. I'm not denigrating or minimizing the power of thought, the power of conceptualization, the power of ideation, the phenomenology of belief systems made real through thought and through the senses into the world, and the creation of ideation into forms. But I'm also pointing to the phenomenology of thought as distinct and different than the concept inherent within the thought. And here points to the empirical nature of Dhamma or Dharma, direct experience. None of us would ever be satisfied, to state the obvious, with the idea of drinking or eating or walking or bathing or sleeping. It must be enacted. We must anoint ourselves in the experience. Food ingested into the body provides the nutrient to animate the senses into reality. The Dharma life must be inhaled, ingested, embodied, to oxygenate, create nutrient within consciousness that purposely relaxes conflict and elevates creatively the beauty of freedom. A deliberate asana, the action of transformation, That experience is what I see as the Dharma life. So the two contexts and then confluence. The six senses and their respective objects. The eye sees color and form. Where does it see it? It looks as if it sees it over there, but in reality, as we know, color and form are seen on the eye. Simply close the eye and we no longer see out there. The ear, we identify with the sound, we project the physics of separation and distance, a type of illusion within consciousness, and we assume that the rooster is outside, but in fact, the vibration of sound is waved along through time and space, and it's received on the ear door. In other words, we then extrapolate through the other senses, and we experience existence within the framework of the mind and body. The entire universe is found, it's said, in our mind and body. To be responsible in the Dharma life is to understand the architecture, if you will, of perception for the purpose of knowing the mind in experience, and again, a more refined motivation. How can I self-responsibly inhabit being to refine the unnecessary function to create suffering and conflict to self and other? The deliberate, responsible action to minimize, if not eliminate, as much as humanly possible within our act of courage and mindfulness and wisdom, to inhibit and to produce, to restrain and to act. The two functions, to restrain from conflict and suffering for self and other as much as possible, and to create opportunities for self and other that elevate the status of our shared existence, to embody qualities of harmony and unity, playfulness, artfulness, the beauty of compassion and empathy, generosity. And then we move into what's known as the three streams of life experience. Two contexts, six senses, six objects, external, interior, confluence, and the three experiences of thought, speech, and action. Thought, speech, and action. The Dharma life is to put all three of these inherent streams of existence under intimate, mindful, as much as possible, acutely aware sensitivity. The more sensitive we are with an impactful, courageous, mindful, determined, patient, observational feel for the flow of thought, we know what we're thinking, we know the context that we're in, and we know the qualities of consciousness that we're choosing, either through blind habit or mindful choice, the quality of the thought. We begin to discern mindfully. The thought is infused with judgment, with anger, with fear, with worry, with doubt, with shame, or it's colored with empathy. How beautiful it is to be an artist of the mind, right? We admire artists, actors, and musicians, and filmmakers, and oil painters and sculptors who are specific. And they create these magnificent forms. The Dharma life is to create the most magnificent form, utterly unique to you in your choice and one's integrity and one's dignity, rather than through the habit of conditioning and unexamined presence. Purposeful, deliberate, mindful creation of existence based upon the choices of our own mind. The artistry of consciousness. The three streams. To choose the thought that you wish to think. To restrain from the thought that you're thinking because you no longer want to bring it forward. The same with speech. Choosing language carefully. Both words, tone, spatial relationships with sound and meaning, creating sonic waves and formations that inhabit the truth of a thought, the truth of speech. Where does that abide? It's felt at a very deep level of heart and soul and being. The individual who has a conviction and ethical courage in truth sharing. That's a very fine artistry to know truth from fiction, distortions from insight. That level of Dharma life artistry, I would say, is the life of the conscious Dharma artist, the savant, the yogi, the meditator, the trans-religious embodiment of the vocation. I don't know what other way to look at it. The vocation of being human. To study the contents of consciousness on a felt level and to manifest a purposeful life. Unique to you. The three streams, the three times within consciousness and life. Before we speak, think, and act. If only we had a mindful or a more conscientious access to intentionality. How often we meet or we're in circumstances where there is conversation or interaction and we feel in other, perhaps in ourselves as well, an unawareness of the intention of what they're saying, what they're not saying, what they're doing, what they're not doing, how they're feeling, in denial of their feeling, in the motivation for their thought, in the motivation for their speech, in the motivation for their action. An unawareness of motivation can lead to a collapse, to state the obvious, in bonds of friendship, of love. It doesn't take much to say the wrong thing at the wrong time in the wrong way with the wrong intention, and you do that repeatedly enough, and you have the severing of a long-term marriage or intimacy, a bond of friendship. We are so hypersensitive to tonality and motivation and the impact, the study of impact. So we have the three times before something is said, before something is thought, before something is done. And while it's being thought, while we are saying it, while we are doing it, an awareness that is concurrent with the flow of experience in successive moments. There isn't just a now, to state the obvious. The now is nanoseconds of dimension within dimensions, and really the now points to a stream of cognitive and physical flow realities in which we either inhabit with acute awareness. Look at the microscopic detail in art, in music, in love, in intimacy, in writing. And so nuance is so crucial to the Dharma life. And we can't speak enough about the beauty of sensitivity as a power to the artistry of our living. I use the word artistry a lot to point to a creative uniqueness, because when we get into the Dharma life, the yoga life, the life of culture and religion, there's such a predilection towards conformity, repetition of the group think space action, a type of collective operation lockstep called religion. And dogma paralyzes intimacy. It contorts it, it shapes it into a type of predictable pattern of denial, of spontaneity, of creativity. It's the opposite of the Tantra, although Tantra could be used in the most dogmatic religious way. Anything can be. There are sacred cows all the way to the very core of the goddess and the god. It all depends on the sensitivity of the individual's awareness or mindfulness to be in the flow of the three experiences in different times: thought, speech, and action, before, during. How beautiful it is to meet someone or be in a conversation where it's not going just as it should, and you become more aware of the power of the state of mind known as restraint, out of love, to no longer inhabit ill will. And right there in that flow of thought, in that flow of speech, in that flow of anger, we stop. The power to stop. Any of us who've been, any of you who are continuing with the challenge of compulsion, the challenge, I dare even use the word, of addictive thoughts, addictive behaviors, whether it be substances or inhalations, or whether it be physical behaviors, or whether it be with food. If only we could just enter the mind deep enough to interrupt the habit. The power of the Dharma life can do that, because it gets way down in deep. Imagine if we had someone who was motivated. I want to go so far down into the recesses of my heart, mind, and soul. Imagine if the dictator had that thought. I want to get down so deep as to interrupt this conditioning to oppress and to terrorize my people. That convulsion at the core. Motivation. How do you ignite the deepest motivations of conscience to become so radically self-responsible as to want to inhabit deeper, more courageous forms of interruption of the three flows of experience: speech, thought, and action. Even after something is done, the third time, before, during, and after, the power of mindful reflection, reflecting upon the topography of the immediate and the intermediate and the far distant past. Another three time zones of designation to inhabit with conscious, courageous, mindful reflection that feels into the embedded motivations and the memory banks of thought and emotion. I am so down with the power of consciously reflecting upon the past. I'm not an advocate of being in the moment alone. I am so down with being so alive in the moment that it includes the courage to go as far back as you have the courage to go, to redeem lessons not yet learned from the history of then. And so, moving along from the 3 times into the 5 postures. So, 2 contexts: self, self and other. 6 senses, 6 objects, 3 streams of experience, thought, speech, and action. 3 time frames: before, during, and after. 5 postures. In the monastery, we studied posture. Physical postures, mental postures, Dharma formations as postures, and of course the interplay of deeper existential themes that animate, distort, or create positive formations within these postures. Standing, walking, sitting, reclining. And what else? The 5th? Everything in between: standing, walking, reclining, sitting. Again, nuance. Just as an aside, so much of this was told to me in simple phrases: to know your own mind, to know the mind, the most important task of our lives. In the absence of knowing one's mind, one lives in the trust and habit and conditioning in memory. And suddenly, out of nowhere, we're encountering things that are contrary to our desire systems, our comforts, our securities, and then we're confronted with an obstacle and we don't have the mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual, Dharma capacity to adjust to the complexity. So those who take heed in their Dharma life, the Dharma artist, always deepening their process to be more nuanced in all the ways, which means filling in the gaps. Standing, sitting, walking, reclining, reaching, bending, turning, looking, eating. Eating is just one large concept. But how well do you eat? The nuance of that becomes ever more powerful when we're up close to the intimacy of subtlety. When you are in love, making love, how well do you occupy the nuance of your most intimate qualities? How aware are you between openness of heart and habit that leads to the recreation of historic excitements? Intimate, liberated sex or habitual, predictive outcomes to sex? Freedom versus need. These are states of mind. 5 postures, 5 different dimensions. What are they? This is how I learned from my guides, my Kalyanamitas. Include, include that, and keep including. And knowing that which you include, is it to be kept or to release, to creatively evolve, or courageously let go of? Include, include, and include that too. The courage to be open. All states. Why should there be any state of mind that we're not willing to responsibly feel, to therefore understand its characteristic, knowing its texture, knowing where it will lead or take us if we do it or we don't do it. Include all states, all times, all contexts, all degrees of complexity. In all postures. Then another important element, and I want to reiterate this midway through, is again, the Dharma life is the deliberate, this is again coming back to my feeling about the Dharma life, it's the vocation of inhabiting, as we do, oxygen in our lungs to animate our life. The Dharma life is to oxygenate love as an experience, not as a concept in consciousness alone. Not to live in the ideation of being generous, but inhabit, oxygenate the factor of consciousness known as alobha or dana, generosity. To inhabit, to develop character, strength, ethical courage, dimensionality, just simply one quality of mind. As a thought, I would like to give her a gift. What would it be? And to creatively occupy the atmosphere, oxygenate one's own alobha, or one's own dana, one's generosity, the state of mind known as openness to wish to share. And you go about a day or a week or a month in your life creating a gift to give to her or to him. But you don't stop in that process. You continually anoint the state of mind known as dana or generosity. And you play with that gift as an artist would. Therein lies the Dharma life, based upon the intention of I wish to release my unrecognized fear of being without. I'm going to give this magnificent gift to him or to her. I will not be depleted by it. I will be sanctified. I'll be replenished. I'll be anointed with wealth far beyond the release of this material gift with the energy of generosity. There's no limit to states of mind transforming society. To know your mind, the most important task of your life. Imagine if our leaders knew that, rather than acting out of the habit, the forever war concept, based on unrecognized fear, delusion, and greed. The power of the Dharma life, to know your own mind. Direct experience. I must struggle to understand the value of freedom. Take away someone's freedom in high office and let them feel the absence of mobility, choice of food, comfort. Imagine one of the prerequisites to be a leader was that you must spend 3 months in solitary confinement, meditating 20 hours a day. And you go, wow. And then you must be introduced to the power of your decisions and the influence and the impact of those decisions on other. And it becomes mandatory that you must spend another 3 months living above ground without your suit or your dress, so no one can see you as different from a civilized individual in a war zone. You are living now in Syria. You are living in Yemen. You are living in Afghanistan. And you see and feel and smell what it means to do and to not do skillfully. You must experience the smell of napalm. You must look at a child who's been charred and maimed by a drone attack. You must see the tears and the anguish in the families of what you do and what you do not do skillfully. To know your own mind, the most important task of our life. Direct experience versus ideas of experience. One of the most important elements of the Dharma life is what I would say are unique characteristics and common characteristics of felt direct reality. Knowing a sound for what it is. Knowing the meaning of a word for what it is. Knowing the characteristic of a state of heart. And knowing what masquerades as that state, and you can distinguish the two or the three. What is the difference between dignity and pride? What is the difference between compassion and sorrow? What is the difference between love and attachment? What is the difference between happiness and peace? And how many questions we could offer up to become more nuanced on the cognitive palette of our choice-making Dharma behaviors. Again, the Dharma life. Choice-making, mindful, deliberate behaviors to anoint the space inside and outside through the 5 postures in the 5 different dimensions, in the 3 streams of thought, speech, and action, in the 3 different times, choosing a state of mind and knowing its unique characteristic. No. This is compassion. I am not afraid of going towards the circumstance. I am there to dedicate this period of time to the elevation of that individual's comfort, physical and mental. I am not going to cower in fear and in a pseudo state of empathy. Compassion is not just an action, it's an ongoing set of actions until the recipient of compassion actually is feeling the action of compassion. There you give it, and you give it again. Compassion is a sustained flow of intentional actions and thoughts and speech. One of the most impactful dimensions of the Dharma life for me are known as the three ultimate or common characteristics. I sometimes play in my life on how well I can occupy and see and feel these more common characteristics, rather than just simply playing in the deliberate artistry of mind and context inside and outside, but seeing that in feeling that formations truly are photonic. It's really mind-boggling to me to imagine on a very deeply felt psychedelic, intimate, mindful, meditative level the vibratory nuance of this space that we're in. A photonic castle of frequencies and waves and vibrations, self and other, time, up and down, inner and outer, life and death, freedom and conflict, words vibrating on a sea of impermanence, the characteristic of impermanence. Wow. What if we really, really oxygenated the wisdom of the felt, direct experience of impermanence as the basis of everything? Photonic, semi-dream creatures moving and interrelating in this sonic, invisible, tangible field of emptiness. The second characteristic, the whole concept of anatta, non-centrality to anything. No ultimate up or down in an infinite universe, no center, no external periphery, no north or south, a centerless yet perceivable subject and object without an attending permanent or fixed perceiver of the phenomena. No actor behind perception. Perception is its own function. That's wild to think that we are in a field of reflective, cognitive, and physical lawful realities that don't point back to a permanent, unchanging subject. The concept of self itself, an impermanent ideation conditioned through time and language and culture to be unchanging, true, a soul, a fixed entity. I find that one of the most fascinating concepts. And yes, one can live in the tyranny of overly identifying prematurely with emptiness of self or anatta. Anything can be taken as a sacred cow. Anything can become a mystical dogma, including impermanence, emptiness of self, or even the Buddha's first noble truth of suffering, of stress, of anxiety, of conflict. Just that we live in a universe of mind and body in a context without end and without center point. The mere ongoing subtle stress of being in ongoing perception that we cannot turn off. We cannot turn off consciousness. How many people I have met, and I've been right there, in moments and days, sometimes weeks and months, of very repetitive thought streams of longing, of fear, of betrayal, of anger, of rejection, of loneliness, of despair, of depression. Physical depression, existential depression. Can't stop the momentum of the stream. Dukkha, stress, anxiety, physical, mental, psychological. spiritual, and the deepest existential anxiety. Just being alive in a castle of impermanent cognitive and physical conditions that are said to be lawfully interacting. What if the entire charade of existence, inside and outside, everything were predetermined and programmed? Every thought, every emotion, every memory, every choice, every reaction, every mosquito bite, every illness, every dream and hope, the very second that you're going to die, everything is lawfully, karmically baked in like actors in a 5-dimensional theater. And my God, can the future be known so sufficiently as to say that is the outcome? Do I really know, if I were to be subtle, that I will die on December 26, 2022? And then there is one little thing called a zero at the end of your 99.99999% baked in, called choice. And that choice is called the Dharma Life. Would you embody that choice, or would you live in the convulsive habit stream of the conditioning? There's something about the power of choice that informs all these different constituents of the Dharma life. You take someone's choice from them, they have to live in the memory of the conditioning and the habit. And that's what totalitarianism does. It's taking choice out of a person's mind. They're trying to torture choice out of their mind. Tyranny, to terrorize choice. And here I'm pointing to choice. The Dharma life is about inhabiting that choice, that mindfulness, that awareness, with the most deliberate forms of intelligence that release constraint and suffering and anxiety and suffering and elevate creative freedom and compassion and love. That's all. Choice, the power of choice. These 3 characteristics. Coming to the end, the 3 trainings: generosity, ethical courage, and the beautification of mind, the power of conscious choice making called bhavana. What do? I cultivate bhavana. My teachers would say the power of deliberate shape-shifting into the future, overcoming the stress of dying and death. A rebirthing, the flower of consciousness, into the nibbana, or the enlightenment of freedom from fear. So interesting to me to eliminate the need to even reflect upon death as some catalyst to live more fully. Just drop it. Live in the cognitive flow of an unending flower of freedom, and just live in the nurturing of that flower's opening, and forget the rest. Take death out of life now. Don't use it as some kind of reflection, that there's some kind of compensation. Just remove it. We are living creatures, rebirthing into the now, into the future, into the eternity of transformational awakening. Who knows what next life will be, especially the next minute. Rebirthing. The 3 trainings: dana, sila, bhavana, generosity, moral integrity, and the deliberate beautification of consciousness. Then we have the 10 states of excellence. I'll come to an end at the end of this. Generosity, moral integrity, renunciation, wisdom, effort, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. Generosity, moral integrity, renunciation, wisdom, effort, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, equanimity. And you can have sub-qualities as well. What are some of them? Grace, courage, circumspect, authenticity, naturalness, steadfastness, simplicity, humor, adventure, caring, silence, modesty, humility. Make your list of states of mind, colors on your palette. Live in these states of excellence. Let them be the factors of what bhavana beautifies. They have to be deliberate choice states. Know them, feel them, oxygenate them. And I'll end here. The two motivations that I see most important to me, come what may, so be it. The pure power of Dharma adventure. Call it mystical, the mystical exploration. Come what may, so be it. Take me in every way you need to. I want to learn to know you. I want to learn to love you. I want to learn to embrace you. I want to learn to liberate from you and with you and remove from the genome of totality all forms and formations of evil and ignorance and totalitarianism. The dedication to our lives as an adventure to overcome all forms of dictatorship and denigration and evil. Why not? And the second motivation, how could we not be the mother, the archetypal mother? The embrace of other as daughter, as son, as central to my own reason to be. Imagine if our compassion could be cultivated to the point where it's like the epic grandmother to the grandchild. No matter what you do, I will visit you in the prison of your contempt. It doesn't matter. I will learn to embrace with patience and skillfulness until you too break the code of your unrecognized allegiance to self-denigration. Overcoming insecurity at core heart level, compassion, adventure in compassion. So from my heart to yours, a spontaneous sharing on the metta psychology, what I call the Dharma life, the Dhamma life, the vocation of the individual who wants to make her or his life the artistry of the applied science of consciousness in context. And we cannot neglect that all of us today, I would say, as an inseparable third motivation, is the more courageous edge of compassion and caring, which is creative activism. The deliberate engagement of existence as inherently political, social, and spiritual, and our role as individuals in the company of our friends and community and nations to empower revolt, disobedience, and to confront in every way humanly possible the evil of totalitarianism and dictatorship. Whomever, wherever we see it, inside and around us, disobey, refute, and become creative activists, challenging the structures of ignorance that we see so prominently in the world today. Political tyranny, medical tyranny, social tyranny, spiritual tyranny. Let us not allow these forms of denigration. Let us power up and create a Dharma life that's unstoppable and challenge till there's a victory of freedom for all. So from my heart to yours, Have a beautiful day. Thank you for being in my life. And hope to see you tomorrow, God willing. Thank you.